Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome to Modern Leadership, the podcast where each week we sit down with authors, entrepreneurs, and leaders to explore their journey, diving into the ups, their downs, and ultimately the lessons they learned along the way. Our goal, of course, is to show that everything is figure-outable. Today's guest expert is Sue Salvemini. Sue is an author, speaker, and executive leadership coach, helping leaders and teams align their work with their core values to maximize impact. She's the author of Leadership by Choice, 7 Keys for Maximizing Your Impact and Influence in the Workplace right where you are. Sue is the founder and president of Pointe Consulting Group, where she wears many hats while building a purposeful career. Sue, so great to have you on the show. How are you this morning?
I'm great, and I'm super excited to be on the show today, Jake.
Well, I can't wait to jump into your book and Focal Point and all the great stuff that you're doing. But before we do, tell us a little bit more about you from a personal level. Who is Sue?
Oh, that's such a fun and ever-changing and developing story. But Sue is when I'm not working, which is my passion, so I don't really feel like I work. And I know that's cliche, but it really is true. I have 3 teenagers that are 17, I don't even know them, 15, 17, and 19. And they are a ton of fun, a husband that I've been married to for over 20 years. And when I'm not fully engrossed in just being with my family, I love doing different types of sporting events. So personally, I hate exercising, but I just hate it. But I love to run. I love to row. So my latest and newest passion is rowing. So I picked that up a couple of years ago, and I am literally counting the days down until I'm back in the boat out on Lake Quinsigamond at 5 a.m. sculling with a couple of friends in the morning. So I like to do all sorts of different things to keep me occupied and outdoors and exercising without thinking that it's exercising.
Well, and you're in the Northeast where rowing and that crew is very big and very popular. Out here in the West, we don't see and hear too much about it. So sounds very exciting. Now, let's jump into this and talk a little bit about your business. But you mentioned something in your intro that was interesting to me. And you said, I'm passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about my job. And I know it's cliche, or it sounds cliche, but I feel the same way, Sue. I love what I do. I count down the minutes until I can get back into work. And sometimes the clock ticks past and I know I got to get home, dinner's on the table. But tell me a little bit about why you're so passionate about what you do.
Well, I think, first of all, it's a great question. And the answer of why I'm passionate is exactly where my mission is, because I feel that when I reflect on my life and the jobs I've had ever since I was in high school, the first jobs and whatnot, I've always really enjoyed my work. And about 4 years ago, when I was at the transition of ultimately what ended up being founding my company, I took a lot of time and reflected on that. And I realized that being passionate about what you do is actually the exception, not the rule. And so as I was thinking about what it was about what I've done over the years, or the opportunities or people I've worked with that have afforded me the opportunity to be passionate, I decided that I wanted to create a place where I could help people find that same passion. So it's sort of, I'm talking circumlocutiously, but I'm passionate about what I do because I have the opportunity to work with really intentional and focused and driven people that want to seize every aspect of who they are and what they do. And I'm passionate because I get the opportunity to observe and witness people coming into their own authentic selves and finding fulfillment and joy in the day-to-day work that they're doing.
Now, you talk a little bit about working in your passion, being passionate about what you do, being an exception, not a rule. And I would agree with that. And I think we have a lot of listeners to the podcast that are saying, maybe I'm not passionate about what I do today, but I'm kind of pot committed, if you want to use a poker term. I've kind of slid all my chips in this direction. I've spent so much money on schooling or so many years trying to climb the corporate ladder. What do I do if I feel like I'm a little bit stuck and I'm not super passionate today about what I'm doing?
Well, Jake, it's a great question, and it's the answer that I set on a quest to help uncover, and thus wrote my book in an effort to answer that and help people really dial in to their passions, one that they're working towards, but also to not miss what's right in front of them. So in my book, and which is essentially a compilation of my own personal experiences as a leader and as someone that was always very goal oriented. So I've always been, achievement focused on, learning, growing, developing, getting to the next, truthfully, promotion or role or company through my career. But at the same time, I was happy in the moment. So what I found is, as I've later worked with groups and individuals, is what's the missing link? They're so focused on the future that they often were missing what was in front of them. So how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, this is huge. I love this concept because I feel like I've walked this path myself, Sue. How do you do that?
So the first thing you do, and I really outline this in my book, is you have to take some time to really reflect on who you are. And I hate saying this because a lot of people say it. And I was just in an event last night with a group of 12 people, and we were launching the program of going through the book. You need to know who you are on multiple levels. In the book, what I start with is really understanding and learning how to embrace your core values. Now, when I say core values, I guarantee you that someone listening can immediately rattle off 4 or 5 things that define them. Or if I said, pause right now and write down how would you describe your core values? What's most important to you? Every single person can come up with a short list and sometimes a long list. And then typically what happens is we just take that as an assumption. We move on. We don't really think more deeply about that. And what I found is, and what I encourage people to do through a series of exercises, is really dig a little bit deeper so that they can truly get into the depth of who they are, both from a value structure and also from a historical assessment of strengths and gifts and moments in their life that they were thriving and in their glory. And what happens is when you can truly align and really understand what motivates you, what makes you tick, what infuriates you, what causes you conflict and angst, when you really can get to the underlying source of that, what you're able to do is find incredible liberty and clarity around directionally, 1, where you want to go, and 2, where you're existing in the moment.
Well, I love this idea, but I'm struggling a little bit with how do I do this on my own? Because I am who I am, and my mindset is somewhat set because, I'm 42 years old and I've gone through a lot of experiences in life, and I'm very introspective in that I've got the voices in my head talking to me. There's the imposter voice and there's the confidence voice and there's all these voices that are talking to me. But now if I take a moment as an introspective person, sit back a little bit and try to identify when I was most passionate, when I was in the flow, when I was most excited about life, sometimes I still just come up with those surface answers that you were talking about, that high level stuff. How do I get myself to drill down? Do I need to hire a coach? Do I need to see a therapist? Can I do this on my own?
You can absolutely do it on your own. And I walk you through the ways to do that in the book. And it's the key is, and this is just a single question that you can ask yourself. And I teach all of my clients and anyone in my workshop to do this, because ultimately the goal is to have people be able to self-explore, or at least with a partner or some others that you're close to help in this process. So here's the question I ask. One question, where we find out what's critically important to us is often in the extremes. Moments that we were extremely happy and just felt filled, or more often the easier places to uncover this is when we really got frustrated. What was triggering us? So moments in your career or in your jobs that you were triggered, something caused you great conflict. Okay, so an example I use is when I used to hold meetings, one of my triggers truly was people walking in late. to a meeting. I mean, an absolute, if you watched my body language holding a meeting, okay, people would walk in late and I would have a meeting and that would trigger me. So if you were observing me, you would see or feel a change. I might not say anything. The next thing would be when people got on their phones or opened up their computers and started tapping away in the middle of a team meeting. Okay. So at the surface, if you said to me at that moment, what triggered you? I would say tardiness, like just a disrespect for the time. That was my gut, like this. And that is just that just is just rude. It's disrespectful. It doesn't respect or appreciate anyone else's time. And that's where I landed. So then the next question, and I would leave that. And honest to goodness, for years, I just was like, punctuality is important. And I would set that up in, the pre-rules, so to speak, of engagement. Sorry, I was in the military, so sometimes I speak that way. But so don't worry.
We like it.
So the deeper question to that is, okay, Sue, what about that? And this is the question. What about that bothers you? So now I have to think, well, what about tardiness or this interpretation of disrespect bothers me? And I can tell you that right now, if there's listeners that this is an issue, probably for everyone that is listening, they would have a different answer at this second level. So for me, at that time, the what about it was my time is valuable. And this is time that I've committed to this group, and now it's inefficient.
I almost think it goes even a little bit deeper. As I listen to you, I could hear in your voice that there is an element of this disrespect that you have. Yes, your time is valuable, but not only is your time valuable, but on a even higher level, respecting other people and respecting the effort and the time that they gave to set up the meeting, to put it together, to have an agenda, to come prepared. All of that is worthy of respect. And therefore you go, the first level is, I hate tardiness.
Right. Well, then the real, it's not even 2 tiers deep. You've got to go a third. Okay. Which you started to tap into. So it's okay. So what about respect or the sense of disrespect is bothering you? And it's usually at this third level that you start to get raw. Okay. And then it can be actually individualized between a person and you. It could be a lack of confidence. So for me, at that time, and I'm thinking very specifically about a time that I was leading a team, it was ultimately a sense of not the disrespect. It was actually a sense of feeling that I didn't really have a leadership influence.
That you were an imposter, that you weren't as prepared as you wanted other people to see you as.
Exactly. So then the work begins. So now we get to, so then you go back to what's the core value about that? And in the end, the core value had nothing to do with tardiness or respect. It had to do with valuing being an inspirational leader that people just wanted to be timely with.
Yeah, I want to take you on a flip side of this, because as I walk through this in my head, and I think a lot of our listeners are walking through this in their head, and I feel very similar to you, Sue. I hate tardiness. I definitely feel disrespected. I go a third level deep, and I definitely agree with you that there's this imposter, that there's this unpreparedness. I feel this real strong desire to come to everything, being fully engaged, fully educated, fully ready for it. But I want to ask you, what about that in this regard? Maybe I'm putting too much pressure on myself. Maybe it's not that I'm not prepared. Yes, that's a value that I have, preparation. But maybe it's not so much that I'm not prepared. Maybe I am sufficiently prepared. What is it that triggers in my mind that says, I'm going to let this bother me, as opposed to somebody who will just go forward with the same preparation I have, which most likely is sufficient for the moment?
So it's an excellent question. And I love that you asked it, because this is exactly what I will ask my clients, or in the book, I have them do this. So the initial trigger was around the perception of a value of untimeliness. This person is disrespectful, or this group. But in the end, what was really triggering it was a deep value to be an inspirational, prepared, confident leader, which is very self-focused. So the trigger often is triggered by another person. And the first thought is valuing something that the other person doesn't value. But in the end, in this particular case, it was about a personal value about being a certain type of leader. So now the next part of that, and this is where the change happens, is to say, okay, so let's go back to the situation and the trigger, right? What's another way to look at this situation? In other words, that it's not directly against your value. So I'm valuing being this present leader that's prepared. So in the end, the action that triggered it and my response to it is based on an interpretation. So the flip side is so I'll ask my clients, or in the book, I challenge them, say, okay, so what's another way? What might be someone's completely opposite view of the triggering event of why this person walked in late?
They could have been preparing.
Right. Okay. So I love this. So this is a real story too. So they weren't tardy because they were lackadaisical or irresponsible. They were tardy because they were they'd been in the office 2 hours prior and was working on a major project and was trying to be prepared. So their action had nothing to do as a response to who I was or wasn't as a leader. Yet my interpretation was inward.
And this is happening every single day in every company across the world.
All of the time. I swear I have a blog I want to write on We've Lost Our Voice. Because the talk track that goes on inside of our heads is it can be so debilitating. And we forget to pause and ask and be curious and seek understanding. But it's because it's usually dealing with something that we might be insecure about or that we're desiring to change. But let's just get back to the values for a minute. Like, how does this resonate with understanding your core values? So through this process of going 2 tiers, what was it about that? What was it about that? I uncover that one of my core values actually is not about timeliness per se. You know what I mean? It's more about being a strong, confident leader. Okay. So now if you take that value and in this particular situation, you play it out, and now we've done the exercise to really reframe what is that statement. What would a strong, confident leader, how would they act in this situation? Okay.
Well, and the interesting thing is you've now switched it from something they did and you're reacting to it, them coming in late. And now it's something that you actually have control over. You want to be a strong, confident leader. Let's lay out a plan to do that.
And so now just to fast forward it a little bit, just to show the example, and also this is real world, the fear of having a potentially difficult conversation with this person that was originally there, because remember, it's fear because you're thinking you're going to reprimand them for coming in late, potentially. And that's a me versus. So the fear of that is the value I'm going to honor is I'm honoring my own value to be this confident leader that's curious, that can, and so now I'm more inclined to have a conversation with this person about, I value, this is a value I have, is to be strong. And when you come in late, I'm sensing that there is a disconnect. I want to understand because I can sometimes misinterpret it. So now you're being authentic. You're communicating your vulnerability. It's triggered me. In the past, it's triggered me because I've had this impression. So let's have a conversation about 1, what's going on so I can understand, and 2, how I can better support you. So now you're choosing and you're showing up in a whole different position as a leader, plus you're improving this dialogue with this particular person, and you're seeking understanding. But it's the exercises that sort of give you that ability to move out from truthfully being blocked in your inward space, understanding the value that you're choosing to honor. So now the value isn't I'm talking to you about being late because timeliness is important to me. It's important to me because I want to be a strong leader. I need you as part of the team, or I value your input. I mean, in this case, this was somebody that their input was critical. I didn't want them to be late, but this all came, So is that making sense?
Yeah, this absolutely makes sense. And what it does is it takes an adversarial relationship and makes it collaborative. And it really, everyone wants to help you. If you've got the right team following you, they want to see their leader succeed because they know that your success is their success. And by collaborating with you, they want to help you succeed. Now, I think this leads to my next question and thought, and that is, this doesn't happen overnight. And we live in a kind of an overnight society where we want things done yesterday, especially as leaders. We're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we wanted this done yesterday. But this takes process. It takes time. It takes development. It takes stubbing our toe a little bit and then recalibrating and retrying again. How do we keep ourselves from getting frustrated as we go through this process of becoming the type of leader, the influential leader that we are trying to become?
So it's a great question. And when you're working with people that are highly driven and want everything yesterday, it's natural to feel frustrated. It's natural to want to be able to communicate perfectly all of the time. I think just recognizing that you can get frustrated is really a huge part of it, because the next step is to accept first and foremost, that you are perfectly imperfect. And I say that frequently. I really mean it. And I'll tell you, it's sort of having your own acceptance that we're all vulnerable and that it's growth. But let's just take forward the power of you accepting that you are growing and developing as a leader, and the power that that has on the people that you work with, whether you are a solopreneur or you lead a team or you're part of a team or you lead a company, okay? When you can accept that you are growing and constantly working towards being a leader that works well with the team, and you can put your own language in. I don't like to use my language, okay? Whatever is resonating. The first step is just becoming open with that, with the people that you're working with, and almost saying, look, this is, and it moves into actually the second chapter of the book, which is about vision. When you can get clear on where you're trying to go as a team, as a company, and you can say, look, this is where we're going, and there's going to be bumps along the way. And I know that I've got some bruises. I'm trying to work and mold. So I'm not always going to do everything right and well. I'm trying, and I expect all of us to try. And I'm looking for feedback. And this is the hard part. I want to create a culture so that we can communicate and know that we're trying to get better together, because if we're getting better as individuals and we're getting better as a team, and this goes back to the original question, we're going to really like what we do together a lot more. And we can't, life is too short. Like, we want to be loving what we're doing. So let's just work through this. And the sooner we face these things and the sooner we fumble, I sort of have this like fail fast so that you can move ahead. You know, if you know the conversations are going to be ugly, then have 10 of them as fast as you can, because the sooner you get the bad ones out of the way, or the less than stellar ones, you'll identify the roadblocks, and you have that much better chance of improving them and having the ones that are more aligned with what you want faster.
Yeah, and it's kind of like when you're working out, right? You break down those muscles so that you can build them back up. The faster you can break down those conflicts, break down those impasses that you're having with your team, the faster you can rebuild them back up. And so I agree with you. Fail fast, go right after it as quickly as you can.
Well, and I think the other thing is I'm going to say almost always, the story that we're telling ourselves in our head about the situation, about the person, the interaction, the client, is far worse than it really is. And here's the deal. I can guarantee you that the story that you're running over, that's causing you to procrastinate, that you're debating whether you reach out to that client or that colleague or that team member or that boss, right? You're building it up and creating such a spiral and a tornado, and they aren't thinking about it. They are not giving it the time of day. And so the sooner you go head on and you approach it and deal with it and get it on the table, okay, the sooner you can actually know what you're dealing with and then work towards resolution.
And I absolutely agree with you, Sue. This has been a great conversation, and I think this is evidence of why the listeners need to just go grab a copy of the book. We barely scratched the surface. We took a look at chapter 1. We might have started to turn the pages of chapter 2, but there's so much more. Go pick up a copy of Leadership by Choice. But at this point of the podcast, let's shift gears just slightly and talk about learning from leaders. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, Sue, our first question in this section is the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table. What are you reading?
I read a study Bible. Now, so I love reading about Jesus as a leader. And the reason I say a study Bible is because it provides context. So regardless of your faith or belief, the study Bible that I read and I actually give away to a lot of people, it has text that really helps put in perspective the times of this incredibly powerful leader, this inspirational leader that didn't have a cell phone, that didn't have the internet, that had to walk to press a message. So I love studying how historically Jesus operated as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Our second question is your leadership superpower.
It's my faith. And it's the true, I truly embrace and believe that every person put in front of me was put in front of me for a purpose and that they have a purpose. So my superpower is to try to inspire myself and others to find their greatness and really find their authenticity.
Everybody is put in front of us for a purpose. Sometimes that purpose is for our growth. Sometimes it's for their growth, but always our interactions are somebody's growth and hopefully all of our growth. Our next question is a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra, something that you live by.
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
And they don't know how much you care by a tweet or by an Instagram post or by one small act of kindness, although those can be starting points of this process. People know you care by the time, the attention, the effort that you put into the relationship. Do you agree with that?
I do completely.
Wonderful. Our final question then is the book that you most often gift or refer to friends, family, and colleagues.
Well, I told you it's the NIV Study Bible. However, I will say another book I've gifted is The Power of Focus.
Tell us a little bit about The Power of Focus.
The Power of Focus by Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, and Les Hewitt. It is all about being intentional with where you see yourself, creating a vision, and how you create a life that really stays on the narrow of what you're intentionally trying to do, staying focused.
And I'm always impressed when I look at people, we see them on TV, we see them at athletic events, we see them out in the workforce. People who really hone in their focus, really know the direction that they're going, are doing amazing things. And I think that that's great advice for the listeners of this podcast to really find what your passion is, really focus in on the direction that you're going, do the things that need to be done. Don't expect it to happen overnight, and really find that success that you truly desire. Sue, this has been a terrific conversation. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Before we let you go, tell us how we can find out more about you and pick up a copy of this great book.
Just go to leadershipbychoice.com, and that takes you to the back end of my website, which is focalpointeinc.com. But leadershipbychoice.com will link you to the options for the book, the audio book, and it's available on Amazon. And happy reading or listening. And thanks, Jake. I really appreciate this time.
Awesome. You are terrific. We want to wish you the very best day. Thank you for being this week's Modern Leadership Guest Expert.
Thank you.
All right, my friends, and a big thank you to Sue for coming on the podcast and talking about leadership by choice. My favorite part of that title is the by choice. I mean, this is something we intentionally need to do. This needs to be on our mind. It needs to be something that we want, that we're passionate about, and that we're focused on. And I love this conversation of really going deep. Not one layer, not two layers, but really going 3 layers deep to find out what it is that you value, and then finding out how you can be intentional about your self-development, about your progress and your success. Not blaming other people when they're late or when they miss a deadline, but really looking on your end, why it bothers you, what it is about it that bothers you, and how you, moving forward, can join together with your team to make progress. Of course, everything that we talked about on this episode of the podcast can be found at jakeacarlson.com/ML179, episode 179. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life. And remember, everything is figure-outable. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.